Hello and welcome to our webinar today, an urgent panel discussion on how to handle the Kaspersky ban. There are a few things we'd like you to know. Livestorm begins all of our webinars with your sound on mute. If you can't hear us and you only see my lips moving, click on the screen to turn on the sound. Your microphone will remain muted, but please use the chat to talk to us. Drop us a note, tell us where you're dialing in today from. And if the alerts are too much, you can mute them by clicking on the bell on the right-hand side. At the end of this presentation, you will automatically get a recording, but if you would like the presentation slides, please email my colleague, Ellie Miller at ellie.miller@criticalinsight.com. Today's speakers, I have Mike Hamilton, co-founder and CISO of Critical Insight. He is the former CISO of the City of Seattle and former vice chair of the DHS Government Council. Frequently quoted in major media like the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, and SC Magazine, Mike is an in-demand speaker and educator leading our free monthly security awareness trainings. Mike also leads the nonprofit Pisces, which provides no-cost cyber monitoring for small local governments and uses collected data to train the next generation of cyber analysts at 20-plus U.S. colleges and universities. Also joining me is Fred Langston, the co-founder and chief product officer for Critical Insight. A pioneer in InfoSec with over 2 decades of experience, Fred was an author of the HIPAA security rule, and with his professional experience in security, he has worked for thousands of clients, creating effective risk management strategies, enterprise security, and data protection programs. The security services are used by hundreds of companies today. Also an in-demand subject matter expert, Fred has been quoted by several of the nation's most trusted editorial news outlets, and I'm your moderator, Virginia Case. Let's get started.
Okay, showtime. Hi, everybody. And yes, yet another hotel room. Hopefully travel is coming to a close here pretty quickly because I'm tired of hotels. What are the facts? All right, so this has kind of captured everybody's imagination, and there's some things worth being upset about. There are some ironic things about this, and we're going to dig a little bit into Russian law and talk about why the United States is a little on edge here. So in terms of being on edge, we all know that the geopolitical situation is globally heating up. And this is brand new news. Russia has declared the U.S. an enemy for the first time. And, there's the quote from Vlad, "We are now an enemy country for them, just as they are for us." That's a little bit of tit for tat, but it really leans into some of the difficulties that we're seeing in the world right now. And so this is not surprising. The actions that are being taken by the United States are also not surprising, but I think we're in a little bit of some uncharted territory right now, uncharted waters, as it were, if you like Fred's background there. So yes, Kaspersky has been banned in the United States. And I think notably what they did was they sanctioned the executives, not Eugene Kaspersky, which is a little interesting to me. And usually when the United States, does this sanctioning, it's because they want to get somebody arrested, right? They want them to get on a plane and go to a vacation in Bulgaria where they're going to get snatched or something like that. That's not what this is about. They are not able to start new businesses in the United States. They can't serve as board members on American companies, things like that. There has been a mention of OFAC. Okay, so that's the Office of Foreign Asset Control. So OFAC prohibits sending American dollars to certain places around the world. So for example, you can't send money to Iran. You will be arrested for that. You cannot use the banned cryptocurrency exchanges, some of which are used by ransomware gangs, because you're going to be prosecuted for that. You can't do that. So, this is an authority that can be used for this. It seems a little oblique to the point here, but it's an existing authority. And I thought the mention of OFAC was pretty interesting when we were doing the research on this. Now, you see the Commerce Secretary quote there: "Russian has shown it has the capacity and the intent to exploit Russian companies like Kaspersky to collect and weaponize personal information of Americans." A lot of this, I think, is driven by things that have happened in China. Fred, you're on mute if you're talking.
Sorry, folks. I want to bring up the fact that Eugene Kaspersky was not covered under these sanctions. And this shows a real challenge. I think a lot of people feel Eugene has not been kind of a driver of any of this. He's probably a victim in this. But a lot of people wonder why is the leader of this organization not included? Well, you remember Kaspersky was started by Eugene as a small organization almost 25 years ago and grew into this international behemoth. So he was probably along for the ride. He is the kind of the technical leader of that group. The rest are the business leaders and the ones that are probably more likely to be compromised by the Russian government. So that's my speculation on that. So
yeah, and Eugene Kaspersky has always been a very highly regarded, person in our business. I mean, he's never been considered a bad guy.
yeah.
But so here's the list of executives that have been sanctioned, again, not to arrest them, but to prevent them from having any control over American companies, serving on boards, things like that. Okay, so who is Kaspersky? All right, Fred talked a little about that. They are headquartered in Moscow. They do have data centers in Switzerland and other places, and they call them transparency data centers. I mean, they've really done things to kind of dissociate themselves from the stigma of we're a Russian company that has a piece of software on a lot of American computers. Third largest vendor of consumer grade IT security software. And we're going to come back to that issue of the consumer grade software. A lot of people, individuals, yes, businesses, nonprofits. I mean, there's lots of people, lots of companies, organizations that have it, but it's really commodity software and a lot of people use it. Global research and analysis, and they actually do frequent updates of their signatures. Antivirus is a signature-based technology at its core, and Kaspersky is still kind of that, and we'll loop back on that as well. Now, Kaspersky has been accused of pulling confidential data off a home computer of a national security agency contractor. And this was a big deal for a while, and it was never, I think, proved conclusively. There was a lot of speculation. There was some circumstantial evidence. I don't know that that really happened, but that was about 10 years ago. And so in 2017, this happened, and shortly thereafter, the United States government started taking steps to ban Kaspersky. And the first thing they did was they banned it from any federal agencies, which the federal government has the complete authority to do. So here's a bunch of data from Wikipedia. If you're not familiar with Kaspersky, it's interesting to learn something about them. Okay, Kaspersky has been banned. Their executives have been sanctioned. What are the implications for us? Because there's a lot of real grumpiness about this. And I believe that there are some issues here that are going to be created that are not the ones the federal government wanted. I think they've actually done something to create an outcome that was specifically one of the ones they said they didn't want. Okay, so again, there's been this 10-year effort, right? After this thing happened in 2017, they were banned from federal agencies, along with, again, a couple of Chinese companies because of the surveillance technology that's built into the technology, into their products, and especially, in telecom deployments. We really don't want them surveilling our communications with, that kind of ability. So we're trying to address cybercrime and critical infrastructure disruption. And these are the things that are top of mind for the federal government right now. Cybercrime was $8 trillion in 2022 globally. That makes it the third largest economy in the world. We are acutely aware that, Russia is behind a lot of that. And, just by association, Kaspersky gets pulled up into that. The geopolitical situation we have right now really is putting everyone into this defensive posture. So this is kind of erring on the side of caution, I guess you could call it, from the United States. It's not really a tit for tat. It looks like this has been thought through for a long time. I don't know how well it was thought through in terms of the impact it's going to have on managed service providers, value-added resellers, home users, things like that. But it is true geopolitically, we're starting to find all of these technologies that, yes, indeed, have surveillance capabilities built into them, and we're very worried about that. I would say, the term we came up with when we were building, out this deck was the globalization of technology is what we are starting to focus on now and be afraid of. All right.
Yeah, I wanted to mention that we're the Russians and the Chinese are not the only ones that do this. So we, in fact, if you remember, almost 20 years ago, put together one of the NIST encryption ciphers had a built-in weakness that only the government knew about. So they could then decrypt these communications without everybody knowing and thinking that they were secure communications. So it's not just the Russians, right? I don't want to say that we're not in this game as well. So keep that in mind. We do some of the same things ourselves.
Yeah, and we get banned in other countries for that too, right? It's everybody does it, and when it's espionage, everybody kind of looks the other way, for espionage, or they have, historically, but espionage historically has been done by spies and photographing documents and things like that. That was namby-pamby compared to what you can do if you have control of technologies that are deployed all over the world. So we are banned, U.S. companies and citizens, starting July 20. All right, they did not give this a lot of runway here. So the resellers, and there's a lot of managed service providers that use Kaspersky for their customers. They can only sell this stuff till September 29th. And after that point, no more signature updates. This is what is going to create more mayhem, I think, than the federal government wanted. So if you are a Kaspersky user, you got to come up with another solution. And if you are a consumer and you don't know this is going on, or if you're a very small organization and you don't know this is going on, it's not clear that anybody's going to tell you that you need to get away from this product. This is the kind of information you would have to trip over somehow and, be aware of. And there's just a lot of people that don't read the kind of things that, we all read. So, we're going to get to a point, I believe, where we have a pretty good installed base of Kaspersky remaining in the United States with no signature updates, deteriorating over time.
Yeah, I think it's incredibly interesting that resellers can sell what they have in stock. Like any human in the U.S. is going to go out and buy something that will die within a week or two of them selling it.
Yeah.
So that whole space, the resellers have come out and said, U.S. government, you're putting us in a terrible position. We have stock on hand. We can never sell. That's another thing. There may even be some legal challenges to this because we put a whole bunch of resellers in a relatively poor position. At the same time, they should have known this is coming. So you kind of, if you play in that space, you take a little bit of risk selling a product like that. You have to expect something bad may happen.
Yeah, David's asking a question here. When will the AV signature update stop working? I think, well, that's a really interesting question because the company will no longer be able to provide antivirus signature updates after this date. Really, how are we going to enforce that? Right? Are we going to, block Kaspersky at our national, logical border? I don't think so. We don't really have that capability. Are we going to prosecute those who continue to update their signature? I don't think so. That sounds dumb. So, enforcement here seems a little poorly thought through. Okay, so why are we concerned about this, right? To double down on these things, let's get into some specifics. What could happen? Okay, so they could use the agent on your computer to inventory things that are on there and go, oh, well, this person who is, maybe highly placed in some organization is using a vulnerable Adobe reader. They know exactly what to send that person in order to get them to bite on something that'll take over that asset, right? That is possible. They could send in malware as an update, right? A signature update that ends up being malware. That's not likely. That is not likely. That would be sussed out very quickly, and the brand damage sustained by Kaspersky. And remember, this is a global company, and there are lots of countries out there that use lots of Kaspersky software. So brand damage like that would cause customer flight globally. Not likely that that's going to happen. They could withhold updates so that they could be exploited, right? So U.S. is concerned, and this is where this gets funny. U.S. is concerned that Kaspersky could identify some individual that the Russian government wanted to compromise, and not send signature updates to that one asset, so that that could be exploited. That is possible, but as you can see, that is the condition that the United States has created itself. This is also a quote from the United States government. The products also threaten economic security and public health in the U.S., potentially resulting in injuries or loss of life. I don't know where they came up with that. That does sound a little hyperbolic. If we're talking about, okay, Kaspersky being deployed into a hospital, hospitals don't need Kaspersky to get knocked over by criminals. The criminals are doing just fine without using Kaspersky. I really doubt that a nation state would directly attack a health institution, a healthcare sector institution. I just don't think so. However, home users, right? This is big time commodity consumer grade software in the United States, right? It's used in a lot of businesses in other countries. It's largely a consumer product here in the United States. They're not going to get signature updates, and are they going to know that? I don't think so. Unless Kaspersky is forced to notify all their customers of this, and they have complete latitude to say pound sand.
Yeah, I think the really interesting part here is you as a business may have some of your staff using Kaspersky at home. And if they're using it at home, you may get a compromise on a home machine that then compromises maybe your home router, which is a very popular thing to do right now. And then they sit there and watch all of your business traffic moving across the wire. So I would suggest that you ask your staff, does anybody here use Kaspersky at home? Because that's a risk to your business. And I think that's something people might miss a little bit, that, hey, it doesn't just have to be on your work computer. It can be on a home computer for somebody that works at your company.
Yep. Okay, so if all this comes to pass and Kaspersky is deployed out there, and a lot of home users and maybe even some businesses, nonprofits, things like that, are not getting signature updates, their endpoints are going to deteriorate over time. That means basic commodity malware can compromise those assets, okay? So the federal government has created the condition it said it was afraid of. Kaspersky could withhold signature updates. That's exactly what's going to happen, and we did it to ourselves. So congratulations. Okay, so what does Kaspersky say about this? What does the Kremlin say about this? This is pretty predictable. So here's the Kremlin said, well, this is the U.S. stifling competition. Yeah, because we are really concerned about the Sophos and, Carbon Blacks of the world going out of business because Kaspersky is such a powerhouse. Nah, sorry. That's, we understand how capitalism works. There's plenty of competition out there. This is actually kind of true. And this is the statement from Kaspersky. The U.S. government has based its decision on the geopolitical climate and theoretical concerns rather than empirical evidence that, yes, indeed, Kaspersky is, a listening endpoint and can be used in this way. And we've seen it used in this way before, apart from the time when the NSA person, had documents taken off a computer. Apparently, again, it was circumstantial evidence more than anything else. And Kaspersky says it cannot do this, right? It can only access statistical information, right, in aggregate. And this is, again, why they have a what they call a transparency data center. I believe that's what that's all about, so that somebody can actually come in and inspect exactly how their software works.
I just don't buy that statement. I mean, when you have something that is antivirus, which has a kernel shim, in other words, you've injected something into the kernel with, absolute base root privileges, you can do anything you want. Now, the software may not be designed to do that today, but making it able to do that is a trivial change and an update. So I both the, hey, we haven't actually identified a risk. No, we have. The risk is you can do this, right? Easily. Overnight, we could have instrumented every single endpoint in the world and be able to spy on what's there. So the risk has been identified. That's just not true. And the fact that they say we're not going to look at, if you don't have the ability to look at your data, that's not true either. That's just referring to their current build, which could change, like I said, in one day.
Yeah, well, this is true. They could also have, controls in place to manage access as they should. They may be audited against those controls, right? So Kaspersky may have done the things to at least create the perception in these transparency data centers that they don't do this kind of thing. But ultimately, you are right. It has the privileges to do this because it's been, injected into kernel level operations in an operating system. Okay, resellers are extremely unhappy. Managed service providers sell a lot of this stuff, and they're just considering this to be kind of, trade war things that they got caught up in, and everybody is criticizing this ban, and rightly so. This was done probably with a lot of forethought from lots of folks in the federal government, none of whom are experts in the operation of these things. And they are really looking at the geopolitical situation more than the minutia of the facts here. You can see some of these quotes, right? I don't see how I can really even charge end users for this. Well, the fact of the matter is you can't anymore. Millions of computers, there you go, for home use. Okay, we're punishing home users, and ultimately, this is going to result in home users being compromised. And here's, William Finnegan talking about clients, and companies are going to want their money back, and this is just going to cause a rip in the fabric of the universe for a lot of managed service providers and resellers of this software. So people are unhappy, and you can see the article there yourself from TechCrunch. This is kind of universal. The feeling that this is unfair and is going to result in bad outcomes is pretty pervasive.
So if what I see in the chat here is any indication, I don't see anyone on this chat going, boy, how did they not see this coming? We've all known this was coming. You have to look and realize that people were using this because they had a good deal on the software. In fact, they had to create some very economical incentives for U.S. companies to continue to use it. And now they're caught holding the bag. So I don't want to see anybody's business be harmed by kind of governmental action. You had to see this coming, folks. And I don't have all that much sympathy for the people that ended up in this situation, what you're reading on this page. Because I look at our chat, and I think everybody on the chat kind of feels, come on, we all knew this was coming.
Yeah, and in fact, when I worked for the city of Seattle, we were going to change our antivirus agent. I fired McAfee. I'm very proud of that. And we evaluated Kaspersky, and for these reasons, we decided against it at that time. And this was more like 2010. Okay, so let's try and look at, let's pull back a little bit and look at this bigger picture, right? Because, there's the minutia of resellers can't sell anymore. Home users are going to have their computers deteriorate. Lots of, smaller organizations, nonprofits, or what's coming to my mind, are not going to be aware of this just because they don't ingest this kind of information. I don't know that Kaspersky is going to be required to tell anybody this. Okay, that's, again, the minutia, but there's some bigger picture here. And really, it's this thing about the globalization of technology. So this is not the first time this has happened, and it's really been directed at China a lot. China, mostly because of espionage. Russia, because there's now global conflict going on, and we are concerned that our support for Ukraine is going to cause things to happen in this country. And the FBI and CISA have been warning about this. The Chinese are all up in our critical infrastructure. Well, that's also Russia. And so I think that this is really starting to withdraw from this globalized technology and really start to lean in domestically, we're going to have to solve this problem ourselves because we can't trust stuff anymore. So, Kaspersky is now listed with all of these other companies, and you can go to sam.gov, put in the name of a company, and it'll tell you this is a banned company. And they did this to 70 companies all at once. And now, and those were all Chinese companies. Now they're going for Russians.
Yeah, I wanted to bring up that Huawei USA, the USA arm of Huawei, came to us, I believe it was about 2017, right when they got placed on the ban list, and came to our company and said, we want you to help us prove that our technology is safe and secure and should be able to be produced or be used in the US. First off, we wouldn't have taken on a job like that. And the reality is, there is an organization that does that, Common Criteria, the EAL4 certification, which they balked at the second I told them that that was the way they would have to go to show that their production processes were secure and that they could not inject new things into the code. And they walked away hearing that that's what they needed to do, and they never did that. So I would, if they ever come to you and ask you to prove or to certify or make some statement to the security of something that is a foreign product that is on one of these ban lists, probably just laugh them out of the room is probably the best thing to do. But that was an interesting conversation when they were talking about how unfair everything was and can't we help them? We have great products, and of course, we didn't help them.
Well, it's also ironic because the EAL4 certification has been around since the 90s. When, remember, you and I, a long time ago, we were resellers of Borderware, which is a firewall that is now extinct. And they were really proud of the fact that they were the only firewall product that had that EAL4 certification, which really is about the manufacturing process and the controls there, so that something can't get snuck in. And with the federal government doing things like, software bill of materials and the IoT labeling, none of that stuff needed to be recreated. Common Criteria has always had the EAL4 certification. You can always get it. So, again, the government is creating policy with policymakers, and I don't know that enough technical people are there at the table. That's always been a problem. Okay. All right. Here's why we're actually concerned. It's because this is supported by Russian law. Here's 3 of their data laws, and you can read what these are about. But the take-home message here is if your packets cross the Russian DMARC and enter Russian network space, it belongs to the Russians. They can inspect whatever they want. They're not the only country that does this. And with certain controls in place, we do it too, right? Unless you are a foreign national and subject to the FISA law, they would have to get a warrant to do this, for somebody that was domestic. We have this capability too. But in Russia, this is embodied in law. It crosses our DMARC. It belongs to us. We'll do whatever we want with it. And they made that very clear. They've also I think the Russian response to the globalization of technology is they're all looking for new operating systems to use that aren't American operating systems, and they have practiced cutting themselves off from the global internet.
Yeah, and I have to point out that, as Mike said, it's not just Russia. We know China does this. We don't necessarily point to any particular regulations that they have that allow them to do it, but they just do it. We know they do it. But I also like to point out some of our friendlies actually do this. If you've ever worked at defense contractors, you know that if you're sending anything into France, France does look at everything that crosses their border. In particular, they're looking mostly not for what you might expect terrorism. Well, they probably have a unit looking at it, but they're looking for intellectual property that's moving in and out, trying to determine, in their words, that we're looking for our intellectual property leaving the country. Well, I think most of us realize it's probably the other way around. And most of our defense contractors are very leery moving data in and out of France because of this particular thing. And they're a friend and an ally and somebody that we work with. But that's just part of their culture, right? That's something they do.
And I think this is going to be a global standard. I think all countries are going to do this, right? I mean, we implemented all of this networking and technology, basically in the last 30 years or so, and that's pretty rapid expansion of capabilities that nobody could foresee. And now the ability to surveil, the ability to pull packets apart and see what's in there, is our intellectual property leaving the country, things like that. If we don't start really inspecting all of that, we are in a weakened position. And, I've always been an advocate of treating our logical border as if it was any other border and enforcing a standard of behavior on this side of the demarc. And if you don't meet it, we successively start locking out your businesses until your business leaders go stand on the desk of the president and say, make the crime stop, but and now why they don't let me make public policy anymore.
But I think that's a fascinating thing you're bringing up, Mike. I mean, are we to the point where we're going to start putting borders on the internet? I mean,
Yeah.
we look at the Great Firewall of China. They've
The
done
Great
it.
Firewall of China
I
is
mean, they've done
the
it.
example.
Uh,
So it's possible.
Are we all going to do this? I mean, this could be a turning point, right? This could be a sea change that we're seeing here. That okay, we're at a state of affairs in the world where geopolitical tensions are so high that we start pulling and building borders around ourselves. I think a lot of people are wondering, why does not the U.S. government implement these kind of border controls if all these attacks are coming from Russia and China? And while you and I know, Mike, that they'll just compromise systems here in the U.S. And in fact, mostly when they launch attacks, they do launch from compromised systems here inside the country. But maybe we control any connection from China. I don't know, but I have a feeling things are going to change, right? I think we're in the beginning of a change on what we think of that open and free internet. Information is free. Everybody should have it. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think we're rethinking that.
No, yeah. And I don't know if the attendees here thought that they were going to hear about, this antivirus issue turning into, okay, countries are all going to lock down their borders and, start treating it as a border. But I do think that's where we're going. I actually do. All right. So here are the thoughts. These are my opinions. This is going to make a lot of people grouchy, but I do think it's the right thing to do right now. Okay. Not necessarily because we think something is about to happen and they're about to pull the trigger on, the installed base of Kaspersky and take over grandma's computer. No, it's because countries are very wary of technology globalization, buying technology from other countries that may be antithetical to the standards that we have in the United States. They may be adversarial towards the United States and intentionally slipping that stuff in. And everybody's afraid of this, right? Because we have found it in Chinese technology. We suspect it in Russian technology because there's wars going on. And we know that they keep poking us, poking us in the infrastructure. So these are legitimate concerns. So again, Fred, I don't know if you knew this was coming. This looks like to me as a first step to isolate the U.S. from these threats. And I think that's what's going to happen. I think this is going to end up with the United States and other countries doing the same thing Russia has done, but they didn't do it that successfully, but they have tried it a number of times. Cut us off from the rest of the global internet and then start treating that as a border, right? With a standard of behavior that is expected on this side of the demarc. And to your point about, well, the bad guys will just launch from Switzerland or my Aunt Barbara's computer in Arapahoe, Oklahoma. Okay. True. But we can do attribution of those things. We've gotten better and better at that. And it doesn't matter where it came from. If it's got Russian fingerprints on it, they're attributed to Russia, and there needs to be some penalty for that. $8 trillion lost in 2022 is going to double soon. All right. And if you think about the 5 crime families, of the original mafia, the New York City mafia, where they finally got together and they were a bigger organization, all those little teeny organizations out there, the ransomware gangs, if they coalesce and become a consolidated body, when you have that kind of resources, it's not cyber criminals taking down businesses and hospitals. It's these giant mafia organizations taking down countries. Okay, that's what I am afraid of.
The thing I worry about is really the concept of putting this big border wall in our current software world doesn't make much sense, because we all know almost every product now. If you look at the SBOM software bill of materials, it has all sorts of open source libraries. Who participates in creation of open source products? Russians,
Volunteers.
anybody, right? Anybody from volunteers, right? So you have to think that they are not stupid, and they've figured out, well, okay, if we're gonna get locked out from the front door, we're gonna come in the back door by instrumenting and booby trapping open source modules, which are then built into hundreds, thousands of products. We know they're actively doing this. That's why if you haven't heard of an SBOM, software bill of materials, it's going to become a lot more important to know, because, like I said, commercial products are agglomerations of custom code and usually some open source content. So that open source content is going to be I think one of the next avenues to wend their way into the supply chain and past things like firewalls that we might put on our border. So again, we have to think holistically about this. Just putting up a big wall, right? We like building walls here apparently in the US. They don't work, folks. Walls only work for very specific purposes, and you can easily go around them, over them, under them, right? So that's what we have to consider here.
Yeah, I mean the backdooring of open source modules is happening all the time now. I mean, this is fairly routine. Okay, all right. So where are we going from here? So okay, here comes all of the antivirus vendors going, hey, need to get rid of Kaspersky. So maybe this is the messaging that will be heard by consumers, by small organizations, the nonprofits, the small to medium businesses, the MSPs, everybody that needs to hear this message is going to come from the marketers. All right. So, okay, when they said, this was, anti-competition by the United States, that's not the intent, but that's the way it's going to work out. Okay. This is some upside for the U.S. antivirus in larger context, endpoint security companies. It's bad for U.S. businesses that now had to drop what they're doing and deal with this, because there is not a lot of time before the fuse burns down on this. September 29th, no more signatures. After that point, if you're still a user, your endpoints are deteriorating with time, and you become more and more of a sitting duck, and that is true. All right. But the bigger question is, if you are a Kaspersky user, which is antivirus, which is kind of a 20th century thing, what is it you really need if you're going to replace that, right? You're going to replace that with something that's equivalent, right? Panda software, something like that, that's really signature-based antivirus. I don't recommend it. Those are not the capabilities anybody wants anymore. With all the criming going on and all the infrastructure disruption that we're afraid of, all of those things, the capabilities of an endpoint agent now are not what they were. And we need to lean into those new capabilities, because putting out little fires before your house is engulfed in flames really is reliant a lot on that endpoint and the ability to quarantine that very quickly. And we're getting into this mindset now of the faster you quarantine, the more you are going to reduce impact. All right. So again, not the same as an endpoint security agent, right? Signature-based technology means you're going to write a file to disk, and your antivirus agent says, okay, wait a minute, I'm going to take a hash of this binary, I'm going to go look in my database, and if the hash is in there, you're not putting that thing on disk. That is a signature-based technology. The heuristics that are used now with modern endpoint security products, they're using machine learning in the cloud to develop a baseline of your average behavior, so that if not a signature, we didn't see the signature of the Emotet Trojan being delivered to your workstation, but you started scanning for open SMB shares at 3 a.m., you've never done that before, alert goes off, and ideally immediate quarantine, and we'll go look at you in the morning. Okay, that's really where we have to get right now, because bad guys are sneakier and sneakier, and their techniques are more and more sophisticated, and the stuff hides. So it's really, we need to alert on weird behavior, not necessarily you just got smacked with this thing that we know for sure happened, right? Behavioral analysis, right? That's the thing, right? With UEBA, user and endpoint behavioral analysis, you just did something weird. And, antivirus, who says virus anymore? It's, I don't know. I mean, Newsmax, I don't know. Who says virus? Okay, so in 2019, here's what endpoint agents were, right? And these were largely, antivirus vendors. And there's Kaspersky on the list, and you can see that, who's up and to the right there. Notably, Microsoft Defender has really emerged as one of the best endpoint products there is. And even back then, they were just, all of the new capabilities for endpoint agents were kind of nascent, but still they were way up there. So here's what it looked like back in 2019. I got this off Google Images, so Gartner, don't sue me. You need a new endpoint agent. So, how do we do this? You know what we do? We design a requirements matrix, and we evaluate a number of products. And we've had logos from a bunch of these products in this presentation. You can have this presentation. You can also Google for endpoint products. Using machine learning leverages cloud processing, right? So the cloud processing is ingesting events from all over the world. And that's the kind of telemetry that you really need today's world, because a lot of things are seen first in Brazil, Kenya, places like that. And when they're seen there, we need to be aware of that because it could be headed our way. Be good if it could be installed on mobile devices too, because mobile endpoint protection is still not really fully baked. Some of the solutions you can use are pretty good, but they need to become more pervasive. They need to be generally installable on mobile devices as well as fixed computers, laptops, things like that. Behavior-based alerting, that is a big deal. Again, we need alerts, not because we saw this thing happen for sure and you need to go put this fire out. Hey man, this guy did something weird and we think you should look at this. We have to err on that side now. Big capability here. Remote quarantine through an API, right? Quarantine first, ask questions later. You do something weird in the middle of the night, right into a little network jail. You can't talk out, but we can get to you for inspection. That is the way to do it now. Really, this mean time to quarantine, right? MTTQ, which I just made up, I guess. This is the metric we're going to have to lean into. Important that it can be integrated into a managed service. There are a lot of managed service providers that are 24/7, 365, which is a capability that is very difficult for the average business to achieve. So leaning into managed services, make sure you don't pick some agent that can't be ingested by a managed service. And it's important that it can also inventory your installed software, because there are vulnerabilities in products that people may have on their computers, and you want to know about those.
Yeah, I want to talk about why, in fact, Defender or those kinds of products are up and to the right. And I know this from spending right before Mike and I started this company. I was at Symantec for a couple of years. It was the 800-pound gorilla, by far the largest security vendor in the world, by far the largest endpoint protection vendor in the world. And their secret sauce was very simple. Their secret sauce was, we have 38 million endpoints under management. Our next closest competitor, McAfee, has 8 million. And the rest of those are much smaller than that. Therefore, our intelligence that we can bring in through all our endpoints is vastly superior to everyone else's. In fact, the thing that makes endpoints very powerful are the intelligence they can bring in. Microsoft, watching Symantec, said, you know what? We know why they're the leader, because of their endpoints. We have Defender installed on every endpoint on Windows machine on the world. We're going to turn on Defender, not turn on a service, but we're just going to turn on the intelligence and start feeding all that information, every endpoint we have, back to our security center. Within 2 years, Microsoft essentially knocked Symantec so far off the perch, most people don't even know they exist anymore. And they are up and to the right. They're the number one. Why? Because they have more intelligence, more endpoints, more data to pull from than anyone else in the world. That is one of the things that makes a great endpoint agent, is that it's got a ton of deployments out there to pull this data in. It's hard for me to say the bigger you are, the better you are in this space. But in this particular space, that is very relevant if you're going to be making a choice. And I also wanted to talk about, as some people are mentioning here in the chat, what happens, for example, if you go to Russia or China on a business trip. And I spent years, 20 years ago, I was spent a ton of time with NVIDIA and Intel building their anti-corporate espionage programs for them. And what we learned in that process, for example, if you're going to China, they have a machine, a bunch of machines, that when you go in, you have to hand all electronic devices to them. They're only gone for an hour, so you don't think much is happening. Maybe they're looking at it. That machine, literally, they program what model number you have. It automatically opens the case, goes to the motherboard, solders on a chip that does surveillance, seals it back up, and makes it look as if it came straight from the manufacturer. You don't know any of this happened. It's automated. It does it within an hour, and they hand it back to you, and you now have a completely bugged piece of equipment. Well, all the big companies know this, right? If you're going, for example, into China or into Russia, you bring burner devices. I'm going to go into the country. I'm going to leave this device behind when I leave there, because I know, in fact, that this thing has been bugged, if you will, by the governments I'm being hosted by. So there's a million ways that they're going to come after you, and I see people talking about this here in the chat. They do the same thing with you as a person. They put you in rooms, they can surveil you, in particular hotels. So if you're going and doing any traveling to foreign countries, and it doesn't have to be Russia or China, know that these countries are looking for our intellectual property in particular. They're looking for competitive advantages. So be very careful. Take only in what you need. If you have hardware, it's always a good idea to leave it behind when you leave those countries.
Yeah, so here's a quick story. We had a Chinese national working as a developer for the city of Seattle, and there was an earthquake in China, and this developer's parents were in the area affected by the earthquake. And so he wanted to go work remotely in China and help take care of his parents. And so before he left, we took pictures of the motherboard, we documented everything and sent him off. We were very careful about his remote access. We had him work remotely for the most part. His code was inspected when he submitted it, et cetera, et cetera. And when he got back, we took his computer and we sent it off to Langley, and it never came back.
Exactly.
So true story. Okay, so here's the 2023 Endpoint Agents Magic Quadrant from Gartner, and the ground has definitely shifted. You will see that Kaspersky is not on here. And what we're talking about now are the endpoints that have the capabilities that we just enumerated, right? These are the ones, and I'm going to double down on this. This ability to quarantine an asset through an API call is hugely important. So as we are a managed service provider that does this kind of thing, we love it when you select one of these endpoints that lets us take care of that for you. And when we see something we can't explain, and we've previously, decided on this, agreed on this policy with you, we're just going to put it into jail, right? This thing is not going to propagate. It's not going anywhere. We saw something we think is weird enough that you are in jail. Somebody can deal with that later. And if we have, again, you have to agree on policy. You can't do that with a medical device or something like that. But if it's somebody's workstation in the finance department, hey, lock them down.
Yeah, I wanted to point, people probably don't realize this. You see the very lowest on the bottom is Broadcom.
Yeah.
Broadcom is Symantec.
Does anybody remember Peter Norton?
yeah, that's Symantec. So you see they were all the way up next to CrowdStrike and Microsoft in 2019. They're at the bottom now, right? Yep. So just showing you how fast things can change in this space. And I know somebody was very interested in the machine that they use in particular in China. Although I've never actually seen it, we know it exists. What we understand is they purchase these from the manufacturers of these laptops, right? They're the machines that the company uses, the automated machines. That's why they just type in the model number. It knows how to go and open the thing and solder this on. It's all automated. There's no human involved in this process. It's a conveyor belt kind of system that does this. And that's just, they've been doing this, working with the equipment they buy from the laptop manufacturers. So real easy for them to do.
Yeah. So RJ is asking about machines that bug your phone. There's a whole lot of ways to bug your phone. Spyware, nannyware, things like that. Those are really, kind of low end products that do that, all the way up to the SS7 network that does phone switching globally, has design flaws in it that can be exploited by any country that can go to a telecom and say Costa Rica or someplace like that, get access to that telecom. You can surveil any phone call in the world you want. I mean, this is true. So, there's not a lot that can be done about that, except don't be that target.
And
okay.
For background, Mike and I did work for the company that owned the largest SS7 network in the world. So we have a little background in that space as well.
VeriSign. Okay, so we have addressed a few of the questions here. Let's recap this a little bit. So Kaspersky is banned in the United States, okay, starting July 20. And the signature updates are going to stop on September 29. The reasons for that is because geopolitically in the world, all countries are starting to get worried about the globalization of technology and what can be built into products that we buy in our country that have capabilities that are not on the SKU list, okay, for lack of a better term. There are lots of companies that have been sanctioned in this way. The Kaspersky company has been sanctioned by the United States before, back in 2017, when there's this assertion by the government that an NSA operative had files taken off his computer. And that was for federal agencies. And again, the federal government has all the latitude in the world to say what the federal agencies can and cannot buy. Now this is going to affect consumers, small businesses, etc. And unless there is a concerted effort to do outreach and let everybody know that they're going to have to replace this product, things are going to deteriorate over time, and it's going to be easier and easier and easier to take over any computer that's got a stale Kaspersky agent running on it. So that's the recap. If there's any further questions, that's great. But I think we've kind of made our points here and hopefully driven this home.
Yeah. I just want to spend just a few minutes reminding everyone, we do provide cybersecurity as a service. All these things that you see on here, from preparing, detecting, and responding, are services that we offer here. And certainly we can assist you if you do have Kaspersky. You want to get off of it, we can certainly help you make that move if you need to do that. Virginia.
And I want to thank everybody for joining us today. And if you'd like to stay connected with us, there are several ways you can do so. We have our daily IT security news blast, which is curated by Mike Hamilton and has been done so for the last 15 years. We also have free monthly security awareness trainings online. Please sign up for them. We just had ours for June, but the date has already been set for July. We have regular online urgent panel webinars like the one that is happening today. And we'd like you to also learn about our nonprofit partner, Pisces. You can check them out at piscesinternational.org. I'm going to send a link here into our chat. We'd really appreciate if you would give us some feedback on today's webinar. If you fill out the survey, we really appreciate it to get some of your insights, but also if you have any topics that you'd like to hear about, which will help us develop our content for future webinars. And lastly, if you would like today's deck, because we end up going to that circular file when we attach different files to emails, if you would like it, please email ellie.miller@criticalinsight.com and she'll be sure to make sure you get that file. Final thoughts, Mike.
We're going to have to see where this goes. I think there is going to be a big enough outcry from business where the federal government may do a little bit of reconsideration and change the timeline, if not the actual requirement here to get off of this product. We're just going to have to see.
And I would say that why are we surprised that this happened. I think we probably all should have seen this coming from a long way away. This is, I think, just the logical conclusion of what something that started about 5 years ago.
Yep.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Yep. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.